Okay, we're live. Brent Leary here. Beautiful, I mean, beautiful 70-degree weather, sunny, maybe a little cloud, but not many. Perfect springtime weather here in the A. First of the live streams this week, and this is really cool because I get to have with me Jeff Gomez. Now, I met Jeff through a mutual buddy. Now, he's known Alan Bergson way longer than I have.
Oh,
but Alan's a great guy.
Putting it mildly.
Now, the reason that I wanted to speak to Jeff, he's a geek, and he'll admit that to you. I'm kind of like a closet geek, but I can geek out too. But the reason I really wanted to talk to Jeff was Alan is always talking about corporate narratives, and he talks about storytelling, and he's here with us right now.
Oh, look at that. Alan says it's beautiful in New York.
Yeah. We won't mention what just happened over around Jeff's way, but we'll just stick with beautiful New York.
In Manhattan.
So Alan is always talking about corporate narratives. He wrote this really great blog post for Paul Greenberg's ZDNet blog on corporate narrative. He's always asking me what mine is. And then I said, well, why do you keep talking about this for? And storytelling. And he says, well, I have a really good friend, Jeff Gomez, who is all about that. And he's all about transmedia. And I was like, what the hell is transmedia? So Jeff, before we get to that, I have to admit, I watched, I think it was a video that you did probably like 2010. It was one of those TED Talks. And you were kind of going over how you got into this. And when I say into this, I mean, he's worked with some of the biggest companies on some of the biggest movies of the last couple of decades. You know, Pirates of the Caribbean, Avatar, comic books. I mean, you name it. We'll talk about that.
Sure. And so some corporations like Coca-Cola, Pepperidge Farm. Sure.
Nice. In Atlanta, Coca-Cola is a big one. So,
sure.
But one of the things that caught my attention, because we're about the same age, we're in the same age group. You were talking about when you were younger, watching, and tell me if I'm saying this right or wrong. Kikiter. And I was like, I never heard of Kikiter. And I'm, like I said, we're in the same age group. But I tell you who I have heard of.
Having been given the life of the spaceman from Nebula M78, Hayata now uses the beta capsule and becomes a super being, Ultraman.
That's who I remember. And I remember the beta capsule, and it was so cool. I mean, my older brother and sister could tell you, well, my sister could. I was all about Ultraman and the beta capsule. How did I miss out on Kikiter? Because I don't remember that dude at all.
Well, should I answer that? Because I'm going to get nerdy on you right away.
Nerd out, man. Nerd out.
Sure. You know, in the late 1960s, the Japanese media industry was really starting to boom, and the American television networks had a sore need as they expanded to want to fill out their morning and afternoon programming. They just needed inexpensive content. And so what they decided to do was to take some of the cartoon shows and children's programming from Japan, hastily dub it into English and toss it on TV. You know, you run your commercials, the kids are satisfied, everybody's happy. And so initially we got some proto-Japanese anime, Marine Boy, Kimba the White Lion, Astro Boy, you know, things like that, Gigantor. a gentleman named E.G. Subaraya, who had developed these special effects techniques in the Godzilla movies from the 50s and 60s, figured out how to do it inexpensively. And so he created Ultraman. So Ultraman was like having a Godzilla show in your home on your TV every week. What could be better?
Nothing I can think of. And I always wanted a beta capsule too. I really wanted one of those things.
Absolutely. The notion of transforming was a kind of peculiarly Japanese notion, using a technological device of some sort to alter your appearance or become a giant, was a big deal back then. And so Ultraman was, like the various anime, syndicated to the United States and showed up all over the country. Sometimes on those obscure UHF channels.
Yes, that's
but
how I watched it.
That was a lot of fun. You got to see this giant silver dude fight, Godzilla-like monsters, and that was it rocked my world. Now, Kikaider came along a little bit later, when in Hawaii there was a large population of Japanese people in the 1970s, and my mom, who was capricious and young at the time, moved us from the hood to the hood in Honolulu.
Nice.
And that hood was a lot nicer, I have to tell you. I got my face broke less often.
That's a good thing.
Hawaii. So there was a lot of unique programming on Hawaiian television that didn't make it to the United States, and that included the content that would become Power Rangers. These human-sized superhero changing characters, and Kikaider. Kikaider was not a Power Ranger. He was more like Kamen Rider, an individual a superhero who changed and was robotic. He was an android, and he fought monsters. Now, the reason I talked about Kikaider in that TED Talk was that Hawaii loved their Kikaider. He was their like patron superhero. And so the Japanese furnished Kikaider content and Kikaider products across an array of different media platforms, including making Kikaider feature films that you had to go to the movies to see. And so this notion of a transmedia superhero blew me away. The fact that you could buy the 45 RPM record of the Kikaider theme, you can go buy Kikaider toys, you can watch the TV show, then you had to go to the movies, then there was a sequel TV series, and so it was a universe, a story world of Kikaider. This was 1975. So that changed me, Brent, forever, because I became enamored of story worlds that traversed multiple media platforms, transmedia story worlds.
So was that the beginning of transmedia?
Well, some say the Bible is transmedia. It's whatever is communicated across multiple media platforms in a fairly different and distinct ways, not simply repeated across multiple media platforms. The Japanese called it media mix. And they were, among the first to do it kind of elegantly, in a kind of coordinated and orchestrated fashion. And so I pin that there, as opposed to Star Wars, which happened, in the late 70s and early 80s. The Japanese were doing it in the 60s and early 70s.
It almost feels like I'm trying to think of all these different examples of this now that I kind of have a better understanding. So it's not about just telling the same story or the same part of a story across multiple channels or formats. It's about adding pieces to the story that are distributed across different channels.
That's it. Exactly. Exactly. And in such a way that you don't necessarily need to collect all the pieces in order to understand what's going on. You can, each piece is kind of self-contained, but the act of collecting them and putting them together. So you're doing a little creative, imaginative work in your head, and when it's done that way, it feels good. It's like, I'm watching Spider-Man No Way Home, but I did watch the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man and realized that he failed, to save the girl all
All
those
right.
years ago. And here he is saving the girl this time, redeeming himself. Oh, that's awesome. That's a kind of transmedia experience.
So you have a company, Starlight Runner Entertainment, and your whole business is helping other businesses tell stories in kind of all these different formats and different channels, but piecing together a universal story that is delivered across these distributed channels.
The ultimate nerd job. That is
Okay.
exactly what we do. Exactly what we do, Brent. And sometimes we get to make up our own stories, which makes it even more fun. So we're developing and launching original intellectual properties with partners to create transmedia experiences.
Do you get called in at the beginning when they're trying to formulate the story, or do you get called in to extend the story? How does that work?
Well, it works always, but we like to say if they're really smart, they'd call us at the beginning.
Okay.
We've had to do a lot of meatball surgery on airplanes, right, in flight. um,
Wow.
and that's okay. That's fine. That's why you would call upon an expert. But of course, we'd rather be at the table when when things are being conceived.
How do you go about, or maybe what was the process like creating this transmedia approach like a decade ago, and how has it changed? I would say even more particularly since the pandemic took hold and everything seemed to change. What was the process like before all this, and how has that process been changed because of all this?
Brent, that's an awesome question. 10 years ago, between 20 years ago and 10 years ago, we had a lot of splaining to do. you know, where is this transmedia? We would be asked.
Wow.
It was hard. It was difficult. People don't think in terms of creating kind of a super puzzle for the audience to assemble. They also don't think about, and this is critical, Brent, and your audience needs to know this. Story is no longer contained within the purview of the narrative that is being presented, right? And story is no longer the commercial. It's no longer the TV show or the movie. Story is all of that, inclusive of the stories that the audience are telling themselves about the content, are telling each other about the content, and are telling the storyteller about the content, right? We have become a meta narrative because of what Alan Berkson calls pervasive communication. Everybody in the world has now the ability to say whatever they feel like on social media. And what they say impacts us as corporations, as storytellers, as media and entertainment. So we have to consider them as a part of the transmedia experience. Do you see what I'm saying? So that was impossible to communicate to our clients 10 years ago. They didn't get that at all. You know, the job of the audience was to sit down and shut up.
And buy.
And of course, and buy. Now, could you imagine any one of them saying that today? They might wish it. They might wish it, but it's not happening anymore.
So, just on the entertainment side of it, being able to get the feedback, not ignore the feedback, create a feedback loop that then impacts where the story goes and how the story is told.
That's correct. That's correct.
That's probably the hardest part to bring to the corporate side of things. You know, the storytelling and the entertainment, it seems like they've been much more friendly towards integrating, you know, like for the gaming industry, those folks, they take the software and then they use it in a way that the developers never even imagined, but they embrace it into what that stuff is. That's not what typical corporate America does. They want to try to control every aspect of the story and how it's told and what they want you to do afterwards. How has that changed?
So
has that gotten easier?
No, it's gotten tougher. It's gotten tougher. But here's the answer, Brent. It's about understanding your own story, fundamentally understanding the story you are telling. Okay, so I'm not talking about the story of your product. You know, here's a product. Here's what it does. Here's how it's going to make life all wonderful for you. Buy it. Here's the sales information. No, I'm talking about the deeper narrative that's being told, that this product illustrates somehow. Right. The narrative is the narrative of the human beings who are building this product. Okay, so if you're thinking about Steve Jobs and Apple, he was a person who thought differently, right? He looked at computer interfaces and the way that people dealt with computers and said, you know what? That's ridiculous. That's rarefied. That's elitist to have a language and an interface that normal people can't use. So I'm going to think differently and create a bridge that's going to make it easy for the consumer to operate this machine, right? And so that deeper narrative is hopefully, and sometimes they don't quite nail it, Apple, in the years since Steve Jobs, but hopefully everything that comes out of Apple is with this intention to leverage imagination, to leverage different perspectives, and to leverage elegance and simplicity with regard to the use of the Apple tool, but also of life. That's what we need in life. If everything in life fixed itself the way our iPhones did, things would be a little easier for us. Do you see what I'm saying? So that narrative informs their product, and also builds a bridge between the corporation and the consumer, right? So that when the consumer says, hey, this aspect of what you did not fulfill your narrative promise to us, the fundamental narrative, and we're complaining about it, they can act quickly because that deviates from their core narrative. They can act quickly to fix it and acknowledge the mistake if they're cool about it. Oh, gee, wow, we're sorry. We get it. We hear you. Here you go. You know, we've taken time and expense to fix this. That's an architecture. We call that an architecture for dialogue, which is a part of the new narrative modality. This is the story model that we all must take into account in this day and age.
There's corporate narrative or narrative and storytelling. What do you have to do first? I'm guessing you have to have the narrative in order to tell the story the right way. But could you explain how this works?
Sure. Any enterprise, any corporate endeavor ought to be assembling itself because our companies, our businesses in the world are contributing something to the world somehow. You know, why would you want to do anything else? You know, but to somehow be additive and positive in this world. So that you must ask yourself is, what is that? What's my story? How am I personally infusing my narrative, my story, the things that I had to surmount in life, the things that concern me about what's going on in this world? How does that story get infused into what my company is about and what my products do, right? If you can answer that question, you will start to come up with a kind of foundational narrative. Now, I don't mean the story of how you guys got together and built your company. I mean the why. Why are you here? What are you doing with this thing? And what do these products have to do with making the world a better place? Okay. Once you've achieved that, then you can have fun telling a story about your product. That story, the advertising, the marketing, the interface with the rest of the world, is informed by this foundational narrative. In doing so, that's your North Star. That's your why. That's how you'll never fail.
Alan asked me to ask you about Halo.
Halo, the video game franchise.
Right.
Well, Brent, actually, this can serve as a lesson to some of your audience members who may just be starting out and are interested in kind of making a name for themselves. You know, the reason why Alan talks about Halo is because when I was younger and just starting out, I was frustrated with Halo. I loved the game, but I saw that the game was having a difficult time breaking through to popular culture. I felt at the time, this was in the early aughts, that video games one day should be the launch platforms for multi-platform entertainment franchises, and that Halo really had the goods to be able to break through. But I saw it was having some trouble. At the same time, I liked the music of Madonna. and I saw that her career was at a lull at the time, and so I wrote an essay called "Master Chief and Madonna Are Leaving Hundreds of Millions of Dollars on the Table."
That'll get your attention.
And it was about how both of those iconic characters or figures were not leveraging transmedia storytelling to tell their stories in compelling and engaging ways, in ways that would reactivate older Halo games and older Madonna albums, right? Wow. And would build new fan bases, bigger fan bases for both moving forward. I wrote that article and posted it, I don't know, to some message board or something. And the Producers Guild of America picked it up. They thought it was interesting, and they invited me to join. Actually, out of that article, because it contained some interesting ideas that they'd never even heard of before, transmedia storytelling, and they put it on their site, and suddenly I got a call from Microsoft.
Wow.
And not from Madonna, by the way. Madonna, call me. I'm still here. Call. But they flew me there to give a seminar on Halo, where I told them that that they should be proud of Halo, because Halo was reminiscent of epic poetry. In other words, I built an appreciation in them for their own foundational narrative. I talked about how Master Chief was representative of the warrior who needs to end war, not the warrior who perpetuates war, and so forth. And they really kind of appreciated it. And that turned into a multi-million-dollar engagement. That was one of the biggest projects that we ever did for Microsoft, for any entertainment company.
Do you find that when you first talk to a company who may have been intrigued by something you wrote or said, or they bring you in, and their vision for their product is like this, or their vision for their customer is this, and you had to help them to understand the vision should be like this, or the story could be multi-leveled, much wider, but they're so focused on their marketing message as opposed to a story which could reach an audience in a much more meaningful way. How often do you have to change their original thought process about their own product and their own customer in order for them to understand you guys are just being way too short-sighted here?
Brent, you are touching on the secret sauce. Wow. That is exactly that's the essence of what we've been doing for the past couple of decades. So that's a brilliant observation, and thank you for kind of figuring that out. Here's the deal, Brent. I grew up in a chaotic environment, as I mentioned before. There were a lot of times that it was so tough. I didn't know how I was going to go on. The things that saved me, Brent, were not so much other human beings, particularly early on. It was stories. It was the thoughts and actions of great characters, heroes, Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock, Sherlock Holmes, Gandalf and Frodo. These are characters who faced overwhelming odds and used their minds, but also a little physical action to get out of the situation and succeed and make the world a better place as a result. So I understand the value of telling a story that's going to reach millions of people. I'm excited by that because I know what it's like to be on the other side of that. So a big part of my job and the job of my team is to stand in front of these people who own the stories and who have access and who have agency, and to tell them and to remind them how special that is, and how they need to think bigger. Their preoccupation is with making the next quarter. Their preoccupation is office politics, and rivalries and knuckling under to pressure from, their corporate masters. And I go in there and say, dude, You know, you have this magical, wonderful thing. I'm going to show you how cool it is and show you how to think about it in a way that more people can understand how cool it is. Do you see? And we understand the production processes across an array of different media platforms, so we can help you to create a transmedia strategy so that this rolls out elegantly and in concert. Symphonic narrative, symphonic narrative, to engage your audience. And that when they hear that, when they listen to it and act on it, that's the highlight of my career.
Nice. So how do you get the right mix and tell the right piece of the story in the right channel? Because I could see, you'll capture this kind of audience if you bring this piece of the story to them in a comic book, or you'll get this group of folks if you tell this story arc with a short video clip. How do you decide that kind of stuff?
um, I had to. I did not get this TikTok. What is this TikTok? And so, like anyone of our age, ignoring TikTok was the initial strategy. Until I started to figure out that the algorithms in TikTok tended to expose the right kind of content to millions of people quite rapidly, right? You can develop a following on TikTok 10 times faster than on YouTube or Instagram. Wow. Well, okay, that's kind of interesting. Now I guess I have to look at some TikTok. So in examining that media platform, what I had to start trying to discern were the patterns. How do people interact with this? What satisfaction are they deriving out of it that's distinct from any other platform? And what kind of stories can be told on that platform? And what I realized was there is something going on here, and by kind of breaking the code, I can advise my clients about the narrative extension of their story world, how it would best show up on TikTok, and that's really what I've been doing with film and television and YouTube and Facebook and audio, podcasts and so forth. It's really just a matter of truly diving deep and figuring out how human beings interact with the content in ways that are deeply satisfying to them.
Jeff, this has been a really great conversation. Where are we going to be with transmedia and storytelling 5 years from now? Is it going to be radically different, evolutionarily different? I don't even know if evolutionarily is a word, but it is now. But how will storytelling and transmedia be most different in 5 years?
I think in two ways that are actually related, and I'm super excited about it. What people are starting to learn is that the aspect of transmedia that's been tough to crack is this notion of the euphoria that we experience when something fits together. When we make the psychological leap and snap two pieces of the puzzle together, you know that from learning, from when you were a kid in second grade and started to figure out how the world worked. It gives you a feeling of agency, a feeling of power when you can snap those pieces together, and it makes a bigger picture and a bigger one and a bigger one. That is a special kind of writing That's a special kind of storytelling called narrative design. Narrative design. Everyone in your audience ought to start looking into narrative design. We got that term from video games because a video game storyteller, a writer or developer of video games, needs to create a narrative that is incomplete without the participation of the player, right? So I'm going to let the player fill in these blanks, interact with these characters, complete these quests, fight these monsters, and so forth. So I can't tell the whole story. I have to design a story that needs your participation in order to complete. Well, this kind of design sensibility is what Kevin Feige does with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? He is planting seeds and Easter eggs in all these different movies that the audience is sitting there going, "Ah, I get it. Oh, that's from this movie. Oh, that's from that movie." You know, they're putting it all together and so forth. In much the same way, by the way, that someone sitting in a stadium watching a ball game, a baseball game, is filling in the statistics and the histories of the players and the different teams and so forth. And that's where that passion comes from. That's where that ardor, fan ardor comes from. Okay, so now we are going to formalize narrative design, and we're going to tell new stories with it, not just interactive stories, but story world stories. And so the design sensibility is going to be like a customer journey, as you and Alan put it, where there is no story without the customer, and the customer wouldn't even be there without the story of the
Right.
product and so forth, right? It's intrinsic to each other. So in the next 5 years, we are going to start to master the art of narrative design.
Nice. Would the customer be the hero in the hero journey?
Well, I think we are going to make a little switch, right? There's the notion of the hero's journey, where I am the hero and I am going to march out into the world and conquer things, and I'm going to take on the challenges and defeat the bad guy, get the treasure, and bring it back so that my family, my community will benefit, right? That to me is a lot about the assertion of right on wrong, right? I'm the hero, so I'm right. My values, my concerns, I'm going to assert them so that I can win, right? I think if too many of us do that, you get what you're seeing on social media right now. A lot of people asserting their rightness on your wrongness.
They call it personal branding.
There you go. There you go. We're going to switch to the collective journey modality. So we're moving from hero's journey to collective journey, where we collectively exist in a system, a story world, a system that has flaws in it. And our job as storytellers, as people creating products, and as the audience, is to kind of navigate across this system to fix it, to repair the system. Do you see what I'm saying? So this isn't about killing a bad guy or defeating your rival. This is about looking at the greater system, which has some problems. And those problems, if we don't solve them, Brent, we're in big trouble, right? Things are getting a little complicated. So we need to solve them. And collective journey storytelling will teach us, will give us a new narrative modality. And that narrative modality is one where we get over ourselves, where we reconcile, and where we repair the system. And if we can figure out how to do that, life will get a little bit better than it is right now, I got to tell you.
That's awesome. The one last thing I'll ask you, I mean, you've done such really interesting work, and you kind of made your own. I was going to say hero journey, but after that last answer, I'm not going to say that. Your own career journey, and then you have to top it off with doing a podcast with Alan Berkson. I don't necessarily know if that's a good thing or not, but tell me a little bit about. I want to make sure I get this right. The Street Corner, Cosmic Street Corner.
There you go.
At first, when Alan told me about it, I thought he said the Cosmic Street Coroner. I was like, what is this? Quincy for the 21st century or something? We don't really need that. All right, tell us about that.
Okay, well, Alan is a super smart dude, and I've worked with him on corporate narrative, and he's really become one of the world's top experts at corporate narratives and the a way that companies can engage with their clients and the consumer at large. That it's so fantastic. And the conversations that we've been having since essentially we were kids, we were college buddies, they're always so much fun, and I get so much insight out of them. And he has a way of kind of sharpening my brain, because I'm all over the place sometimes. And we just decided it's about time to show that dynamic to people, with a focus on story, on narrative, and on developing story worlds of all kinds, whether they're entertainment, a consumer, a product, or even geopolitical. We talk about all that stuff on Cosmic Street Corner.
Awesome. Don't tell him this, but yeah, he is a smart guy. But you didn't hear it from me.
Your secret's safe with me.
So I'm going to pull this full circle and say, when I was looking at the TED Talk, and you mentioned Kiter, and that immediately brought Ultraman to my mind, and to pull up that video. Well, I didn't stop at that video. I went to your Twitter profile page, and what did I get greeted with? My boy Ultraman. Awesome. What's this about?
You do your homework. To harken back to that story about Master Chief and Madonna, I've learned that you actually, if you know what you're talking about generally, you can actually manifest the realization of your dreams. You can actualize your dreams. So along the way, occasionally I'll talk about something I love, and sometimes once in a while it's Ultraman, right? So there's publicity out there about my adoration for Ultraman, and the Japanese heard about it and wow. Reached out to me through their licensing company in the United States and said, hey, we want to reintroduce Ultraman, this kind of nostalgia brand, to North America. It's been gone for quite a while, and we and I said, sure, of course. And so what I've been doing, and here's what's really unique about this project. It's different from any other that I've done. I asked Tsuburaya Productions, the Japanese production company, if I can start by building an architecture for dialogue with Ultraman fans. Okay, so I had no content, nothing new from Ultraman here in the United States, but I wanted to galvanize the fan base and let them know something special is going to happen. And they said, "Oh, sure." And so I went into the fan clubs, on Facebook and Twitch and Reddit and so forth, and said, "Hi, I have questions about Ultraman. Can you guys help me?" and I started just talking as a fan to all of them. But little by little, they started to figure out that I was with Ultraman, and they put the pieces of the puzzle together, and realized that I was building these virtual events and inviting them to these virtual events. They were exclusive, with exclusive content in them and so forth. These weren't expensive to build, and they came and had such a rocking good time. They told all their other fans. So before long, all 60,000 hardcore Ultraman fans were lit up with this relationship that they developed, not just with me, but with the brand. And now the brand is bursting out all over. Now licensees want to have a little piece of Ultraman, and Netflix is making a massive investment in Ultraman content.
Wow.
This is as a result of planting these seeds, starting with that architecture, and coming together collectively to represent passion for a brand to the powers that be. And now everyone wants to be involved with the Ultraman.
And everybody wants their own beta capsule.
This is 2 years. Everyone's getting their beta capsule. It took 2 years to do this, and now there's an animated feature coming from Netflix in 2024.
Jeff, this has been great. In fact, it's been so great. Nikki K is asking, Jeff Gomez, why are we not working together already?
Contact me through LinkedIn, Nikki. We'll do it.
Awesome. Hey, Jeff, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for making time to do this. Maybe we could talk a little down the line to learn what's going on, see how things are changing.
Absolutely.
And I'll be watching, or not watching, but listening to the Cosmic Street Corner.
Brent, thank you so much. This has truly been a pleasure. Thank you.
Take care. And thank you for all who are out there listening and watching and all that. And I'll be back tomorrow, back to back, a few good minutes, talking with Woodson Martin from Salesforce on App Exchange's 10 million installs. So a little different. Oh, look at that. Is that the Klingon thing?
Welcome. All right, Brent, I got to run. Talk soon.
All right, take care. And everybody, thank you for joining.